on Fixing the Money Thing. What is the best way to contact the IRS? Call, email, right? Tax expert Dan Pilla has the answers you need today on Fixing the Money Thing. With most families burdened in unsustainable levels of personal debt, most Americans believe there is no way to have financial freedom. However, author, pastor, and financial expert Gary Keesee believes most families can be completely out of debt in less than 7 years.
You must get out of debt. You've got to make right choices with your money right now.
Gary and his wife Drenda are now on a crusade to share this information that changed their life so that you can not just survive, but prosper in today's economy.
Your life can be totally transformed by an idea in the marketplace.
This is Gary Keesee, Fixing the Money Thing.
Hi, I'm Gary Keesee, and welcome to Fixing the Money Thing. There's one word that causes fear to go through people very quickly. It's the IRS. People fear the IRS, fear the judgments, the penalties, all the things that the IRS represents to people. And money is involved with the IRS, your money. And so we've always said for years and years that you need to know how taxes work so you can keep your money and know how to negotiate, how to set in place proper parameters, understanding how taxes work so you can keep your money and not just give it to the IRS and not know what you're doing with it and get in trouble, which is what our guest today has been talking about all week with us here on the air. Dan Pilla joins me again. He's 35 years a tax attorney litigating people's problems with the IRS, 14 books. Associated Press says he knows more about the IRS than the IRS does itself. 6,000 media appearances. There's no one that knows more about what we're talking about than Dan Pilla. Let's welcome Dan to the program.
Thanks, Gary.
Dan, it's great to have you again.
My
We've been
pleasure.
talking all week about this topic. And it's interesting, I've talked to so many people, when you talk about taxes, their eyes glaze over.
Yep.
They'll spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on tax liabilities every year, regular taxes.
Sure.
But they don't want to talk about taxes because a couple reasons. It's too complicated. The IRS, they're afraid to deal with the IRS. They don't want to dig into it or challenge anything. And so people just continue to lose money because of this intimidated type of approach. Because we don't want to deal with the IRS. And who's going to understand a 4 million word document called the IRS tax code? And so, Dan, that's why people like you write this book, How to Get Tax Amnesty, which is a fantastic book. So, Dan, tell us briefly, you've been doing this 35 years. Are my assessments correct? People are afraid of the IRS.
There's no question about it. The IRS strikes more fear into the hearts of more Americans than any other government agency there is. And the fact of the matter is, Gary, the Internal Revenue Service touches every American, and there's no other federal or state law enforcement agency that does. You don't have to worry about the FBI unless you commit some kind of a federal crime, right? But the Internal Revenue Service is there whether you like it or not. And as a matter of fact, when the IRS, and I talk about this in the book, How to Get Tax Amnesty, the IRS issued its strategic plan. It has a business plan, just like any other organization does. They issue it every 5 years. Their most recent business plan, Gary, talks about creating and maintaining presence, a sense of presence in the lives of all Americans.
Does that mean fear?
Yeah, exactly right. That's their Orwellian word for fear. That's exactly what it is.
Right.
We want people thinking about the IRS no matter what they do, where they go, who they interact with, and all the transactions they engage in business and personal life activities. We want people thinking about the IRS. We want people afraid of the agency, and the fact of the matter is people are afraid of the IRS.
Yeah. For good reason?
Well, there is a lot of good reason for it. As I said, it's the only agency that can touch every American. And here's the thing that's remarkable about when you're dealing with the IRS, and this is where the frustration comes in. In any other area of law, Gary, that you're dealing with, you are innocent until proven guilty. The government has to prove you did something wrong. When you're talking about the IRS, in the vast majority of cases, the IRS never has to prove you did anything wrong. The citizen has to prove he did it right. The IRS doesn't have to prove you made a mistake. You have to prove you did it right. And so this is the problem when people get called into the Internal Revenue Service. There's no allegation that the IRS is making. The IRS is saying to you, essentially, prove you did it right. And this is why we get so many penalties that are issued by the IRS every year.
Well, I've been in financial services 34 years, and I've seen debt working with clients all these years. The thing that I see a lot is you got this tax liability. Okay, it's, you know, they owe the tax liability.
Sure.
And for whatever reason, they can't pay it or whatever. And you get these penalties that are just as big as the tax liability. And then you have interest on top of that. And these people, I mean, in really short order, they get buried with this thing.
Yep, no doubt.
You talk in your book about the ability to, if I read it right, cancel penalties. Now, that just sounds crazy. I mean, in light of what we're talking about, are you telling me there's a way to actually, that we, on our end, we can do something that would actually cause the penalty to be canceled?
Yeah, it's exactly right. You read it precisely correctly, and that's exactly the reaction I get from people all the time. You mean I can actually get rid of the tax penalties? And the answer is yes. Here's the thing that people need to understand, Gary. There's over 140 different penalty provisions in the Internal Revenue Code. And the IRS assesses them with reckless abandon because, as I said a minute ago, the burden of proof is on you. The IRS doesn't have to prove you did it wrong. You have to prove you did it right. And so when there's a tax liability that's owed, they automatically add the penalties and the interest, and the penalties can be accuracy penalties or failure to file or failure to pay or overstatement or understatement or this or that, 140 of them, right? We're not going to make a list. But the thing is this, virtually every single one of those penalty provisions has what's called a good faith or reasonable cause provision. And what that means very simply is if you acted in good faith and based on a reasonable cause for your actions and didn't deliberately disregard IRS rules and regulations, the penalties don't apply. You see, here's what's important to understand, and I talk about this at length in the book. I go through the IRS's written penalty policy. This is in writing in the IRS's manual, and it very clearly states that the penalties are intended to provide a deterrent effect for taxpayers who deliberately disregard the rules.
It says that? Deliberately disregard the rules?
Disregard the rules. Gary, the vast majority of American taxpayers that have problems with the IRS did not deliberately disregard the rules.
Right.
They either made an inadvertent mistake, or they got advice from counsel to do it this way or that way, or they got behind on their taxes through no fault of their own.
Yes.
People who owe taxes didn't deliberately decide. They didn't wake up one day and say, how can I tick off the IRS today? Oh, I know, I'll stop paying my taxes and I'll stop filing my tax returns. That'll teach them a lesson. People don't do that, Gary. People do their level best to pay their taxes in full and on time. And through circumstances beyond their control, they get behind on their taxes. You know, maybe they had a failed business or a marriage that failed. Maybe there was a catastrophic illness or injury. Maybe there was some natural disaster, fire, flood, hurricane. There's any number of reasons why people get into a situation where they have to make a choice between paying their taxes and feeding their families. That's not deliberate disregard of rules and regulations. That's called life throwing you a curveball, and you're doing the best you can under the circumstances to deal with it, as we all have to from time to time. If that's the kind of situation that you faced, then the penalties don't apply, Gary. They don't apply. But here's what the problem is.
I know the problem is. You're sounding good, Dan, but what do I do with this thing?
Okay,
You know?
exactly, right? That's the next question. You can't just call up and the IRS and say, well, you know, Pilla said I could get the penalties canceled, so could you please eliminate these? That's not how it works.
Yeah.
As I said, the burden of proof is on you. All right? So what that means is you've got to communicate with the IRS in writing. You've got to write a letter to the agency asking them to abate the penalty. And you've got to establish facts. You've got to put facts in this letter that will allow the reader to come to the conclusion that you didn't deliberately disregard IRS rules and regulations, that there was a good faith reason why you got behind or why you made the mistake, and that those facts and circumstances justify cancellation of the penalty.
What about if you just don't have the money?
All right.
I mean, that's the reason. Okay, whatever.
If you just don't have the money to pay, then what happens when you don't pay your tax, the IRS assesses the failure to pay penalty.
Yeah.
And the failure to pay penalty is a penalty that runs at the rate of 1% a month for a maximum of 25 months, 25%. And so now, you couldn't pay the taxes, but now they add this 25% penalty on.
What you just said, I mean, I'm not trying to do something wrong. I just don't have the money.
That's right. In that situation, what you have to demonstrate to get rid of the failure to pay penalty is you got to demonstrate that you exercised reasonable business care and prudence in providing for the tax. In other words, you did the things that a reasonable person would do to pay for your tax liability, but due to unforeseen circumstances beyond your control, you couldn't pay on time. Let me give you an example. Suppose it's March 15th and you're sitting on the patio with your wife and it's starting to warm up and you're saying to yourself, it's a month away from tax time. We're going to have to file our tax return and pay our taxes, and we're going to owe the IRS $3,000 or $4,000. But the weather's starting to turn. It's going to get nice out. We're going to want to have the neighbors over for that barbecue. We could either pay our taxes or buy that lawn furniture that we've had our eye on.
Okay.
If you opt for the lawn furniture, Gary, then that's not reasonable cause. You're going to get penalized for not paying your taxes on time, and you're probably going to owe the penalty. But if you're dealing with a situation where your failure to pay is as a result of a lost job or an illness or injury, or your home went into foreclosure and you had to use your resources to get the home out of the foreclosure. These kinds of things are not deliberate failure to pay. These are circumstances beyond your control that a reasonable person could not overcome under the circumstances. In that situation, the penalties do not apply.
Okay, I have a couple more questions. When we come back, we're going to ask Dan some more questions about these penalties and how to get them canceled. When we come back in just a minute.
Today, from Gary Keesee, the Hopefilled package is designed to help you find money, save money, and with tax expert Dan Pilla's help, pay the correct amount in taxes every time so you can fix your money thing. To start, for only $35, get Gary Keesee's 2-CD set, There's Gold in Your Backyard. The kingdom contains hidden treasures, and only those who hear his voice will prosper. Gary teaches you that prosperity lays in the fragments others miss, where to look, and when to act.
We want to help you fix the money thing.
Next, financial freedom requires a solid foundation. And Gary's Financial Foundations Toolkit is the ultimate library of crucial financial information you need. The toolkit starts with 3 incredible Revolution of the Mind CDs on finances, fear, and money proverbs. 90 minutes of scriptures that will revolutionize the way you think. Next, you'll get Gary's highly requested teaching, Heaven, Here and Now, a guide to achieving the life you've always wanted. Also included is a special CD, How to Protect Your Retirement Investments. Call, write, or log on now to get both CD sets for only $35 or more. For those with tax questions or issues, complete the Hopefilled package by including Dan Pilla's newly revised book, How to Get Tax Amnesty, for $59 or more.
This is the first book in the United States of America that ever equipped taxpayers to deal with IRS collection problems.
A nationally recognized expert in IRS procedure and the director of the Tax Freedom Institute for over 3 decades, Dan has been tremendously successful in negotiating settlements with the IRS and helping millions of Americans find relief from tax debt.
Associated Press says he knows more about the IRS than the IRS does itself.
We want to offer relief through Dan's just revised How to Get Tax Amnesty. This 9th edition of the book contains 30% more content and has the answers you need.
I take you step by step through all of the procedures and remedies that are available to solve your tax debt problem once and for all.
Today, more than 20 million Americans owe taxes they can't pay. But tax amnesty is available to those who learn their taxpayer rights.
There's no such thing as a hopeless tax case. This book will solve your problem.
Call 888-391-LIFE. That's 888-391-5433. Write to Faith Life Now, P.O. Box 779, New Albany, Ohio, 43054. Or visit GaryKeesee.com to order the Hope-Filled package. $35 or more for There's Gold in Your Backyard and the Financial Foundations Toolkit. For those who want to learn even more, for only $59, get both CD series plus Dan Pilla's How to Get Tax Amnesty. Gary Keesee wants you out of debt, understanding your taxes, living your God-designed destiny, and of course, fixing your money thing. Live a hope-filled life. Get on the road to financial and tax freedom. Call, write, or visit GaryKeesee.com to order your Hope-Filled package now.
I'm talking to Dan Pilla about the IRS and how to get the penalties canceled. His new book, which is How to Get Tax Amnesty, talks about that, and I I'm drilling him with questions about that right now because I got to make sure that's actually the case. And so far, you've been helping me understand that. And let me ask this question. Someone loses a job, they take another job, but because the market, they're now earning half what they made. You said that if I show, reasonable care.
Reasonable cause, yep.
Reasonable cause, that I can have a penalty, taken off.
That's right.
Canceled.
Yep.
So I don't have a death in the family. I don't have a catastrophic situation. I lost my job. I'm now just trying to survive out there. My overhead was already set before I lost my job, so I'm trying to stay afloat. And this is what I've seen most of the time. Mm-hmm. And now I got this, penalty because I couldn't pay all my taxes. Is that something that would stand up in a court of law?
Yeah, absolutely, Gary. What you just described, I would identify as a catastrophic situation. You lose your job, you have to take a secondary job at half your income. Your previous income. Well, guess what? Your bills don't get cut in half.
Right.
You don't call up the mortgage company and say, well, I lost my job, so let's go ahead and cut the mortgage in half. They don't do that. All right. Your real estate taxes don't get cut in half just because you lost your job. Mostly all of your bills stay about the same, regardless of the fact that your income has dropped. And now you're into a situation where you got to make that Hobson's choice between paying your taxes and feeding your family. The Internal Revenue Code and the regulations define what constitutes financial hardship. There's a definition there. I talk about it in the book. Hardship is defined in the Internal Revenue Code as the lack of ability, Gary, to pay your necessary living expenses. When your wages are cut in half, you then experience the lack of ability to pay your necessary living expenses. That, by definition, is a hardship. And when you've got that financial hardship, that by definition, in turn, is grounds for canceling the penalty for failure to pay the taxes.
I've seen this many times. Guy's a contractor, he's self-employed, and he owes taxes he can't pay. The next year, he didn't file even. Mm-hmm. So he goes 2 or 3 years without filing because he doesn't have the money to pay the taxes. If he files, what's going to happen when he files? How can we overcome his fear to file? He's going to go, I'm done. It's like I owe all this money in taxes and penalties.
Here's the thing that we need to know. Every taxpayer needs to understand that when they start to get behind on their taxes, they've got to keep themselves from getting on what I call the tax debt treadmill. And the tax debt treadmill is the situation you just described. I've fallen off the beam for 1 year. I haven't paid my taxes for 1 year. And now because I've fallen off the beam, I've got this fear in my heart about stepping forward, and so I don't step forward. Now I go through a second year of non-filing and non-payment, and then a third year of non-filing and non-payment. Where does it end? You've got to get off the tax debt treadmill. And here's how you do that. You get off the treadmill by getting current. And what I mean by that is, let's say you haven't filed tax returns for the last 3 years. Now you say to yourself, well, here I'm faced with my 4th tax year. I haven't filed these other 3. I can't file the 4th year because I haven't filed these other 3. That's not true. You've got to file the tax return for the current year to stop the pattern of delinquency. You've got to stop the pattern of delinquency and get off the tax debt treadmill. Now, here's the other thing you need to understand, and I talk about this in the book at length. It's Pilla's first rule of tax debt management. Pilla's first rule of tax debt management is this, Gary. If you've got money to pay the back taxes or money to pay the current taxes, but not both, never pay the back taxes. You have to pay the current taxes, file the tax return for the current tax year, and get yourself back on the beam, back into compliance. Once you're in compliance with the current tax year, then we can go and address those back tax years and negotiate with the IRS on the back tax years. But unless you're current with your return filings and tax payments, the IRS is not going to play ball with you.
That's good information. Your book talks about something called the first-time failure policy.
Yes.
What's that?
Yes, that's a very important thing that every taxpayer needs to know, getting back to this penalty discussion we had. Gary, do you play golf?
Sometimes.
Do you know what a mulligan is?
Yeah.
It's a do-over, right?
Yeah.
Mulligan is a do-over. Right. The IRS's first-time penalty policy is the do-over, Gary. They give you a do-over. It just drives me crazy because...
Come on, Dan. Are you serious?
Listen to me.
I never heard this before.
This is a written policy in the Internal Revenue Manual. It's carved in the manual. I've got chapter and verse in the book for what the IRS calls its first-time abatement policy. And here's what it says. If you are penalized with failure to file or failure to pay, what they call a delinquency penalty, failure to file or failure to pay, and you have been current for at least the past 3 years, in other words, you haven't had one of those penalties in the preceding 3 years, the IRS will automatically cancel that penalty, automatically.
Well, then how do I know I even have it?
But you got to ask them for it.
Oh, I have to ask them.
You've got to ask them for it because they're going to assess the penalty and they're going to try to take advantage of you if you don't know about the first-time abatement policy. But when you respond in writing and you demonstrate that you qualify, and I show you what the qualifications are in the book, and I show you exactly how to do it, they will absolutely cancel that penalty automatically. And they don't tell you about it, Gary.
I was going to say, all this stuff you're talking about, I never even heard it. I've got to have this book, and so do you. So I'll tell you what am I going to say? I mean, you have to know this, or you have to know someone that knows it, and you do. And Dan's put it in an easy-to-read book form. I personally know, I've used this book, 20 years ago?
Yeah. Yep.
When I was just coming out of debt, and I got refunds by applying the principles, by using this same book. So I want to encourage you to get that. You can go to our website, but let's take a look right now and find out how to get it.
Today, from Gary Keesee, the Hope-Filled package is designed to help you find money, save money, and with tax expert Dan Pilla's help, pay the correct amount in taxes every time so you can fix your money thing. To start, for only $35, get Gary Keesee's 2-CD set, There's Gold in Your Backyard. The kingdom contains hidden treasures, and only those who hear his voice will prosper. Gary teaches you that prosperity lays in the fragments others miss, where to look, and when to act.
We want to help you fix the money thing.
Next, financial freedom requires a solid foundation. And Gary's Financial Foundations Toolkit is the ultimate library of crucial financial information you need. The toolkit starts with 3 incredible Revolution of the Mind CDs on finances, fear, and money proverbs. 90 minutes of scriptures that will revolutionize the way you think. Next, you'll get Gary's highly requested teaching, Heaven, Here and Now, a guide to achieving the life you've always wanted. Also included is a special CD, How to Protect Your Retirement Investments. Call, write, or log on now to get both CD sets for only $35 or more. For those with tax questions or issues, complete the Hope-Filled package by including Dan Pilla's newly revised book, How to Get Tax Amnesty, for $59 or more.
This is the first book in the United States of America that ever equipped taxpayers to deal with IRS collection problems.
A nationally recognized expert in IRS procedure and the director of the Tax Freedom Institute for over 3 decades, Dan has been tremendously successful in negotiating settlements with the IRS and helping millions of Americans find relief from tax debt.
Associated Press says he knows more about the IRS than the IRS does itself.
We want to offer relief through Dan's just revised How to Get Tax Amnesty. This 9th edition of the book contains 30% more content and has the answers you need.
I take you step by step through all of the procedures and remedies that are available to solve your tax debt problem once and for all.
Today, more than 20 million Americans owe taxes they can't pay. But tax amnesty is available to those who learn their taxpayer rights.
There's no such thing as a hopeless tax case. This book will solve your problem.
Call 888-391-LIFE. That's 888-391-5433. Write to Faith Life Now, P.O. Box 779, New Albany, Ohio, 43054. Or visit GaryKeesee.com to order the Hope-Filled package. $35 or more for There's Gold in Your Backyard and the Financial Foundations Toolkit. For those who want to learn even more, for only $59, get both CD series plus Dan Pilla's How to Get Tax Amnesty. Gary Keesee wants you out of debt, understanding your taxes, living your God-designed destiny, and of course, fixing your money thing. Live a hope-filled life. Get on the road to financial and tax freedom. Call, write, or visit GaryKeesee.com to order your Hope-Filled package now.
I've been a tax litigation consultant for 35 years. In that time, I've seen every kind of tax case you can imagine, and I've seen a few you can't imagine. And I don't care what kind of tax problem you have. I don't care how long you've been dealing with your tax problem. I don't care what you've tried to do to fix your tax problem. I don't care who's told you you can't fix your tax problem. I'm telling you, friends, there's no such thing as a hopeless tax case. It doesn't make any difference how long you've been dealing with the IRS, and it doesn't matter how serious it is and whether you think it's out of control at this time or not. There's no such thing as a hopeless tax case. In my book, How to Get Tax Amnesty, which has just been rewritten from cover to cover, a line at a time, I take you step by step through all of the procedures and remedies that are available to solve your tax debt problem once and for all.
And Dan, people buy all kind of things as a resource.
Sure.
Even if they don't have a tax liability issue, there's a chance one may show up, anytime, and have a resource where you can just open the book, get this letter in the mail from the IRS. You just let me check what chapter, and we'll just dig into that. And there's the answer right there. That's well spent money. Or they have a friend or a family member that also has those problems. I found through the 34 years we've been dealing with people getting them out of debt that I've referred this book. When did it come out? I can't remember. 1980.
The first version of this book came out in 1992.
92.
It's been rewritten 9 times since then. This is now the 9th edition. This latest edition has expanded the book by about 30%, Gary. And as I said, I rewrote it from cover to cover. Every line is now new and fresh.
It's been an awesome resource. And as a believer, one who loves Jesus Christ and his kingdom, you've always said the money belongs in your pocket where it can
build the kingdom.
Build the kingdom, take care of your family.
The resources got to be available to build the kingdom.
Absolutely. And that's, so it's just good. It's a good thing to talk about is taxes. So we want you to have the information. That's why we do the program, Fixing the Money Thing. We want to help you fix the money thing. We want to see you out of debt. We want to see you winning in life, happy with vision and, ideas that you're funding for the kingdom. God is moving you and you're taking territory. That's what makes us happy to see you do that. Go to GaryKeesee.com, get the material, get the book. You'll find all kinds of other resources there about the kingdom of God, how the kingdom of God can help propel your life in God's way. His righteousness, His understanding of how money works will change your life like it did ours. GaryKeesee.com. We'll see you next time right here on Fixing the Money Thing.
Fixing the Money Thing is brought to you by the Ford Financial Group and Lindsay Honda and Acura of Columbus. When you need God's help, prayer is always the answer. Pastor Gary understands and wants to help. That's why he has caring friends standing by 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, ready to pray with you. Call and let's agree together.
And I believe when it comes time for you to move into another dimension, another level, another area of opportunity, you will come to a place where you are uncomfortable being comfortable. And when you reach that point, it is a signpost that your season is about to change because the Father has need of you, O brilliant one.
If you can't make it to a service, join us at faithlifechurch.org for live streaming and access to past services as well. Visit faithlifechurch.org, where you can experience love, community, and the good life. Dan is just one of the many financial experts available to our partners. Consider joining Team Revolution today. Visit GaryKeesee.com for partnership and all types of kingdom mentorship information. Today's show is a presentation of Faith Life Now.